Today's message is the second in a series on forgiveness. Last week, we talked about our ability to accept that we've been forgiven by God. This week, our focus will be on, can you share that forgiveness with others? So I asked myself a question, and I've been doing a lot of research on this. What happens when we refuse to forgive? A familiar metaphor to many of you is like our refusal to forgive is like drinking poison, thinking that it will hurt the other person. Instead, you poison yourself. Research shows that those who hold on to anger and withhold forgiveness have increased blood pressure, increased rate of heart disease, and other stress-related diseases. So then I looked to the Bible and said, what does the Bible tell us? Everyone knows this prayer, the Lord's Prayer. Look to there first. We are to forgive. We are forgiven as we forgive others. That's a huge standard. And in Matthew, Jesus is asked, how many times should I forgive? And his response is, not 7 times, but 77 times. And in Mark chapter 2, verse 7, and Luke chapter 5, verse 21, it's written, who can forgive sins but God alone? And yet we like to hold on and withhold our forgiveness. When we did the Shack film study, there was one line from that really touched my heart. It says, forgiveness is where justice and mercy kiss. Forgiveness is where justice and mercy kiss. Does forgiving mean that we're excusing the behavior? Absolutely not. God is righteous and he judges fairly. This is also from the Shack film study. Everything has consequences, and no one gets away with anything. Papa tells Mac, quote, I'm not asking you to excuse what he did. I'm asking you to trust me, to do what's right, and to know what's best. All behavior has consequences. And if we understand that sin is anything that separates us from God, then any act that we do that hurts another, anytime we're not gracious, or we're not kind, or we're not compassionate, or we're not forgiving, separates us from God. Not that God's left us, but that we have put in that hindrance to God's flowing through us. In Galatians, Paul writes in chapter 6, verse 7, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Have you known people who have just held on to anger forever and refused to forgive? Are they happy, peaceful kind of folks? Not usually, because you recognize that in them. And the fact that you recognize it shows that it's also within you. In the book of Forgiving by Desmond and his daughter, Tutu, he writes, without forgiveness, and you got to think about this, without forgiveness, we remain tethered to the person who harmed us. We are bound with chains of bitterness, tied together and trapped. Until we can forgive the person who harmed us, that person will hold the keys to our happiness. That person is our jailer. When we forgive, we take back control of our own fate and our feelings. We become our own liberators. We don't forgive to help the other person. We don't forgive for others. We forgive for ourselves. Forgiveness, in other words, is the best form of self-interest. That is true both spiritually and scientifically. We don't forgive for others. Many of you know that I had a tough childhood and there was abuse in my life. Going through the therapy that I went through, there came to a point where I had to forgive the person who abused me. Because until I did that, I was tied to him in a way that I could not be freed. And so it was important for me to forgive the person who abused me as well as the person who didn't protect me. Both allowed me to be the person that I am now. I know there was a lot of talk about whether we should forgive Hitler. You know, it's not up to us. It's not up to us. It's up to God. God only knows what goes on in the hearts of God's people. God only knows what it's been like to be Sue and walk in her shoes, or Glenn, or Hazel. God only knows what it's been like to walk in our shoes. So for us to withhold forgiveness, number one, does a disservice to others, but it also harms us. He writes, while both, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, it's Mpho, Mpho, and I have seen the effects of drinking the bitter poison of anger and resentment, seen how it corrodes and destroys from the inside out. We have also seen the sweet balm of forgiveness soothe and transform even the most virulent situations. So if forgiveness is so good for us, why do we hold on to grudges? Because we do. I really tried to think this through myself. And on some level, when we hold on to our grudges, it kind of puffs us up, doesn't it? We're the ones who have been victimized. We're the ones who have righteous anger. We have a reason to be angry. What it does, it diminishes the pain as well of our humiliation and betrayal. We talked in our group about that frequently. As a therapist, I know that when children are abused especially, and they're very young, they have two ways that they identify. They identify as the victim and with that corresponding vulnerability, or sometimes they identify as the perpetrator. So that we can, when we hold on to that stuff, we stay stuck. Holding on to lack of forgiveness keeps us from looking at our own sins, looking at the times when we've hurt each other, looking at the times when we've been betrayers. It feeds our need for justice and immediate justice, because we're not talking to them anymore, so that's justice in itself. They may not know why. Does nothing. Does nothing to help the situation. No reconciliation. We feel more in control when we can hold on to judgment. We feel more in control. And it has a demand on our sense of fairness. That schoolyard, that isn't fair. How many kids have heard that? How many moms and dads? It's not fair. You're sending me into my room. It's not fair. You're taking away my internet. They like the internet one. And what it harkens to is the Old Testament need to find an eye for an eye. We cry out like Jeremiah in chapter 12, verses 1. Why does the way of the guilty prosper? Why do those who are treacherous thrive? We want our satisfaction that the other has been punished. You may have your own reasons for holding on to grudges, for holding on to anger. May not be what I've just listed. You need to think about that. But the question is, can we trust God to be the judge? And this, again, is from the shack. Isn't that what it all comes down for us? Can we trust that God knows best? Can we trust that God will do what's right? Will we believe that He is the righteous judge? He says He is. Can we believe that His love is enough for us? Enough to heal our hurt? Enough to apply His justice and mercy in their true and good measure? I'm all for letting go of our need to judge. If I had to try to figure that in my head, I think my brain would explode because it's way too much. I can't replace God. I can't be the judge. And what letting go does for me, what forgiving others does for me, it relieves the weight of that responsibility. I don't want it. I couldn't bear it. And you know what? Then I find peace. If you're looking for peace this Advent season, then look in your heart at what you're holding on to. Because I find the peace that if I leave it to God, then all will be well. And I believe that whatever happens, it will be just. I'm going to end with a poem that was in the book, written by Tutu. And what it does, what I think this poem is so great at, it gets at our desire to forgive, but our desire not to forgive and hold on. I want to be willing to forgive, but I dare not ask for the will to forgive in case you give it to me. And I'm not ready yet. I am not ready for my heart to soften. I am not ready yet to be vulnerable again. Not yet ready to see that there is humanity in my tormentor's eyes, or that the one who hurt me may also have cried, I am not ready for the journey. I am not interested in the path. I am at the prayer before the prayer of forgiveness. Listen to that again, because I stumbled on it. I am not yet interested in the path of forgiveness. I am at the prayer before the prayer of forgiveness. Grant me the will to want to forgive. Grant it to me not yet, but soon. Can I even form the words, forgive me? Dare I even look? Do I dare to see the hurt I have caused? I can glimpse all the shattered pieces of that fragile thing, that soul trying to rise on the broken wings of hope. But only out of the corner of my eye, I'm afraid of it. And if I am afraid to see, how can I not be afraid to say, forgive me? Is there a place where we can meet? You and me, the place in the middle. The no man's land where we straddle the lines, where you are right and I am right too. And both of us are wrong and wronged. Can we meet there and look for the place where the path begins, the path that ends when we forgive? Amen. Our closing hymn is number 103. Why don't we sing verses 1 and 2?